Of course, things want to move around. And I'm getting a weird glare. But that's besides the point. Let's try moving that a little bit. Not sure why I'm getting such a weird glare. Apologize for that. So tonight we're going to be finishing up the Total Turtle Tote that I've been working on. And just as a, to show you, here's the one I've been working on. This is what we got done last week, which was the adding the top and binding it to the main body. And this does have the addition for crossbody straps, which goes with the strap. We have our Gryffindor tape, our Gryffindor webbing, which the webbing is from Emporium Threads. The zipper tape, I don't remember where I got it. I've had it for a few years and everything, so. But yeah, we are going to do that. Not sure why I'm getting a weird glare today. I apologize. But on the inside, we of course have our Harry Potter Disney characters. And all my stitching was done using Gryffindor colors. I could always customize it for any house. Blue for Ravenclaw, green for Slytherin, and a gold and black. But of course, it wouldn't be on black vinyl. Probably be on a gold vinyl for Hufflepuff, like this. And then we have the bottom, which we are going to attach today, that I have added a wand to. And then we have the other side of our thing already attached. So what's left is to attach the bottom, bind it, and the bag is complete. I have the crossbody strap already made, and I use rivets. This is 1.5 inch webbing. Emporium Threads does actually carry 1 inch and 1.5 of the house webbing. And for Gryffindor, it says chivalry, bravery, courage, and nerve. And then it has the Gryffindor lion on it, at least on the 1.5. On the 1 inch, it just has the words. It doesn't have the Gryffindor lion. But this is a 1.5, and doing the webbing, this is my crossbody strap. So it's already made. All this is done with antique bronze hardware. And for those who haven't seen it in the past, we have our little Gryffindor themed zipper pulls. We have the Gryffindor lion, and we have Harry Potter on his broom. So today we are going just to show you. This does unzip really well, and it's lots of rivets just to hold the weight. This particular customer is using it for her crochet to crochet blankets, and so see, we do have it open. That's kind of flat. Thank you, Melody. So we have, it opens up. And so when we actually open it up and set it down, it will open up, and this is right side up. Now, I've had one person comment, well, this is right side up, but then this is upside down. And the reason being is that if she's going to be carrying it like this, when you open it, you want it to be the same direction as your top and bottom. And that's the main reason. So that when you look into it, you're going to see everything right side up. Even if it's upside down, looking at it from this. So sometimes you have to kind of play with it to see how it's going to lay in the bag and how you want it to look. You could have it both the same directions on both of them, and then it's going to be upside down if you're looking into it and you're going to go, wait, why am I looking at it like that? So what we're going to do is I actually will leave this unzipped, and we're going to turn this wrong side out yet again. And we're going to take everything has been marked. Welcome. So this is my turtle tote. This is my pattern, and I do sell the pattern on my website. This is the Total Turtle Tote. This is the last step where we're going to be adding the bottom and binding it, just to show you one that's already been done, if I don't try to pull stuff off the table. Here is one I have previously made that is complete. So, except this one, the handles just go like this. This customer specifically asked so that the bag could be carried like this, because she plans on carrying it over her shoulder or as like a cross. So I purposely made her handles go here and here. So one more thing we have to, like normally when I do this, if you see here, I add extra stitching across the bottom. I usually do that. However, because the bottom has been embroidered, and because I have the webbing and rivets, I did not do the extra stitching I normally would add at the bottom of this for more stability, because of all the extra stitching it already has on it and the rivets. So it should be good. I'm not sure why I'm getting a really weird glare today. Same place I always am, so who knows. Welcome. So this is, I use mine to carry my sewing supplies with me. I can fit a small iron, I can fit a small cutting mat, everything in there. And I actually can fit like small cubes. And I say cubes because these are actually, I designed two. Do I have one here easily accessible? Probably not. But I designed a cube that actually has 3 sizes. The small and mediums will fit into the Total Turtle Coat. Here, let me just unzip that one. I can show you. So I use this, and when I go travel, I will actually divide up my stuff, and I'll put fabric in them. I use larger, and so this is the cube, just to show you. And of course, it has clear vinyl on the top, so you can see all the stuff on the inside. But this holds 2 medium size and 3 small. So, and the cube, what I call my cool cube, is also a pattern that I wrote as well. So we are going to get started and get the bottom attached. So we have our bag that is now unzipped, and we are going to get this here, get my little handy dandy stapler and clips. I have my little thing of clips. And I have already marked the centers, and because I'm working on black vinyl, I actually use a silver Sharpie a lot of times inside my seam allowance so you can't see it. So I make sure that my webbing is facing the same direction as my webbing that's on the top. And I'm going to match up my centers. And I'm going to, I've marked the centers on all the way around the bag. I'm going to go ahead and staple them. And I know some people go, you're stapling it while you sew it? Yes, you're stapling it inside the seam allowance, so it's not going to affect it as far as, and you pull out the staples when you're done sewing it, but it helps it not to move while you're clipping it and all that stuff. So I'm just stapling it together. Yeah, it is. I love it. That's my little Tim Holtz stapler. And so I'm just stapling it on all 4 centers, making sure they match up. And then we'll go around and clip it. Welcome, Annette. So, like I said, we are attaching the other side, or the bottom in this case. Now, the difference here from top is that we don't have a zipper to deal with. So in some ways that makes it easier. Some ways it makes it sometimes more difficult, just depending. Okay, so now that we've got the staples, the only reason I'm not stapling all the way around, I don't want to pull out that many staples. That's long and short of it. So now I'm going to clip all the way around. And so you can use as many or as few clips as you want. I use about 6 on the side of the smaller ones and probably about 8 on the larger size because I just don't want it to move. But there are some people who will put a clip like every half an inch. So, and there's no wrong way. It's what you're comfortable with. That's one reason I use the stapler to hold the corner, the one part in. So we're just going to clip all the way around until we get to the others where we started. Now, one thing with this pattern is I tell you to make sure that your Peltex is not in your seam allowance. If it happens to be in the seam allowance, that's not a big deal, but it's a lot more to sew through, especially if you're doing a vinyl exterior. So it will be a little more difficult to get through. So we are just getting ourselves pinned. And or not pinned, clipped. So used to pinning. Well, that's the reason I do it in the corners. Now, not in the corners, the centers. Now, if you're noticing, I'm not actually clipping the corners. The reason being that a lot of times we have to kind of finagle it when we go around a corner. So I don't like to have a clip there. And anytime I put a clip there, it ends up popping off and hit me in the face. So I've just learned, don't put a clip there. So we are just working our way down. We've got 2 more sides. So not too bad. I said that's staple. I have done where I've done all staples all the way around, but then you have to go and take all of them out. So sometimes I'm willing to do it. Sometimes I'm like, that's enough. No more. No, I'm just not up for it today. That's probably the long and short of it. I've been working on a couple other custom bags. I'm getting them cut out. I've got to make a couple, like 4 quilted bags. So a lot more involved in getting those done. Got to cut it, then I got to quilt it, then I got to cut it again. So quilted bags are beautiful bags, but they are a lot of work. Which is why if you are wanting to make quilted bags to sell, make sure you put your time into your price, because those are my most expensive ones. Sometimes metal clips are better. I have metal clips. I use them too. And I use them with certain ones. Like if we talk about it, these are my favorite type. But for around this, because I have got that Peltex in the seam or just below the seam, these pop off too. So I'd rather be hit with the little plastic than the little metal. It's a good thing I wear glasses. Let's just put it that way. That's about all I have to say about that. Or when you have a needle break. I've done that too. We're on our last side to clip, and I'm pushing down the Peltex that's on the back of the bag. And see, this has a thicker part right here to sew because I have the webbing yet again. Now we had the webbing on the top as well. No matter how you do this bag, as it's written, or with the where it hangs right side up when you finish it, either way, you're gonna have straps somewhere, or if you make your strap out of vinyl, you're gonna have a thicker around the seam there. So now I'm trying to get stuff done so I can take Friday off for my birthday. So that's probably not gonna happen. I'll probably end up working still, or at least doing something for me if I sew. But plan on doing a bunch of Legos personally, and my husband's going to take me out for dinner as a date night. All right, so we have this clipped. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a 1/4-inch seam allowance, and we're going to sew all the way around. And so I'm going to move y'all to the machine, and hopefully that weird glare goes away. And yet again, we always start sewing. Thank you, Melody. We always start sewing at the back, or away from our zipper, because it's going to be in where the back where the opening is. You're not going to see it as well, and it's easier to maneuver that way. So I'm going to move y'all. Yeah, see, no weird glare over here. So I have no idea what's going on right now with my camera. We won't talk about that. But anyways, get something to drink real quick. Thank you, Annette. But yeah, I have a couple of quilted bags I need to make. And I have my 9-year-old's foot bag to make. And it's going to be quilted with some foundation paper piecing for the straps. I learned how to do it when I made my prototype for myself. So we are getting started. This is the reason why I unzip it. Because if I had it zipped, then I'd have this thing standing like this. And this would be a pain to try to sew. So I have it unzipped so I can make it lay flat. And that does make a difference. But this is, I will be finishing this tonight. And then we will be moving on to other things yet again. I also like to start and stop stitching the bag to the thing at the center point on the back. You could start anywhere on the bag, really, especially when you're doing the bottom, because you're not starting and stopping at a zipper. But I don't like starting and stopping at a corner because, as you can see, I'm kind of manhandling it right now to get it to lay flat. You don't want to start there because then you're like, there's nothing to come from. So I'm just going a little bit at a time, and I go around that corner very slowly. Kind of leave it in there. And this is actually a lot easier to sew than the zipper around that corner because a zipper likes to roll. Your vinyl or your body is not going to roll up like a zipper tape. So I usually have less issue going around the corners here than I do. Right now I'm just kind of trying to flatten it so I can go around it. But I always find the second half goes a little faster than the first. Or the bottom goes faster than the top. Apparently I missed a thread or something. Things you do when you're got a bag turned inside out, right? So we are taking clips off and move that out of our way. Now, the only thing is when you sew the top, once you get into the binding, sometimes it's a little easier because you're not trying to manhandle the whole bag through. You can actually unzip it and just have the lid flat. Well, you can't do that with the bottom, but that's the reason why we do the top first. And can you imagine trying to do all that with the zipper and everything last? That would actually, because you couldn't make it lay as flat as I'm doing right now, because you can't unzip anything. Well, that's the reason why I always attach the top before the bottom. If you're ever curious as to why I do that and why my pattern is written that way, that is the reason why. Okay, and there is a chance that your corners will not perfectly line up. That's not an issue. We trim off any excess around these corners before we add our binding. And so right now I'm just attaching my thing right here. And we are so as you can see, I just kind of manhandle it, flatten it. See, I'm inside the bag or inside the outside of the bag now because I have it inside out while we're sewing. So we're just going around. You can actually probably feel your Peltex at this point, and you just kind of push it out of the way so it's not in the seam allowance. Like I said, it's not a big deal if it does end up in the seam allowance because, let's make sure that webbing is trying to get up in there. It just means you're going to have more layers to sew through when you're doing your binding. So I'm just trying to save you a headache in the future. So, like I said, I sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just making sure as I go around that I'm staying at the same level. And after we sew this, we will remove our staples. So right now I'm just working my way towards this next corner. I'm trying to make sure that my webbing is not getting caught in my seam. I'm going to tell you, that's not fun when you have to go take out stitches because you've sewed your webbing into your seam. That's how I know. I've done that a time or two. So it's just best to make sure that your webbing, and if this were the regular turtle tote, you would still have the webbing here on the front and the back, just coming from the center body instead of the top and bottom. So you're still sewing them in the same places, just coming from a different location. Okay, so we are working our way around. So we're going to make this flat so we can go around this corner, or as flat as we can to go around this corner. God, I love when things want to be annoying. Okay, so we go a little bit around. Okay, and we work our way around. So as you can see, this is a big bag. It's not a hard, I don't think it's the hardest bag. I call it a advanced beginner or intermediate bag. It's not for, because one, you're going to have to play with binding. You're going to have to do zipper tape. And if you've never sewn zippers, I don't know that this is the one you start with. There are plenty of other simpler bags that you can do zippers with. But this is, I find this is actually a really good bag for binding. And I say that not as because it's my pattern, but I've done binding with a lot of different pattern designers. And each one has their own quirks. And even with that, sometimes you learn to do it a way that suits you best. And I think one of the simplest ways. A lot of people will use waterproof canvas as their binding so they don't have to do any folds, so they don't have the extra thickness. A lot of people will use fold over elastic because it doesn't fray, and you can just fold it over the seam and sew it down. Personally, I like to either use bias binding or to use my own binding, which this does not use bias binding. I just cut straight across the fabric with a certain measurement, and which is in my pattern, what I use. And I bind it. And I will show you exactly how I fold it over and bind it with no problem. No problem sharing that. I'd rather everybody be able to do binding easily. And so even patterns that call for binding a certain way from other designers, a lot of times I'll use my own way. just because this is the way I find is the easiest for me. But not everybody does binding the same way. I've actually started making my own bias binding. Not necessarily because I want to, but because Buy Any Patterns want you to, because you need to have your bias on your binding on the bias, and you want it to match. So it looks really good when it's done, but it's a pain in the rear at times. But I'm getting really good at making it. So to each their own, right? But for this type of bag, I still prefer doing the binding this way. I'm not going to take the time to make the binding. Plus, I could. That's not saying I couldn't. But you don't always have it. And I like having it. If you could see here, this binding completely blends in because it's made from the fabric that the lining is. And so right now, I'm trimming my threads. Now, I'm not going to flip it back around. Mainly because I'm just going to show y'all. Apparently, I've got big, long fraying ends. Gotta love when fabric wants to fray to death. Okay, so we have our piece of fabric that I've cut for our bias binding. Or binding, not bias binding. You can tell I've been staring at quilted patterns too long recently. At our binding. And so we have our raw edges. We have 2 raw ends. Now, this bag, if you're using 44-inch wide, you're going to have to cut 2 strips. Actually, you'll have to have 3 total strips, 1.5 for the top and 1.5 for the bottom, because it will not be big enough. This fabric was a custom fabric, so it is like 58 inches wide, and that is big enough to go around this all in one piece. So I only had to cut 2. So you just have to take that into account what fabric you're using. So we're going to take 1 raw edge. Sorry about that. 1 raw edge, and we're going to fold it over somewhere between 1/2 inch to 1 inch, whatever you're comfortable. And so then we're going to lay it down right at basically at our center mark. And we can look at where our center mark is. That reminds me. Let's take out our staples. So I have my little handy dandy staple remover to take out. It works fine too. That ripstop is good because of how thin it is. I don't know that I would use pull. I have used pull. That's not saying I haven't. But it's not my favorite because of how much it stretches. I know it doesn't fray, but it's just not my favorite because of how much it stretches, and sometimes that can misshape it. So that's why I love how it looks when you have the matching fabric, or when you have a coordinating fabric or binding. So I'll probably stick to doing that in that regards. All right, so now that we have taken our staples out, because I almost forgot, and it's not going to kill your bag if you forget to take out staples. It just means there's going to be a random piece of metal in there. But you've already got other stuff. So we have our piece of binding, and we'll fold it over, and we're going to stick it at our center mark, because that's just where I want my seams to start and stop. And see, if I do that, you can't even see here where I started and stopped. I can see that. I just don't like the stretch, actually, personally. So I know bias binding actually gives you a little bit of stretch, but you don't want tons of stretch. So I guess that's just my experience with it. So make sure when you start stitching, you back stitch. All right, so we are stitching this still at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure everything stays out of the seam. And we're just going to go around, take our time. And of course, what did I forget again? To trim my corners. So as we get to each corner, I will trim them. And when I say you have to trim your corners, you're just trimming them where they're even with each other. So, I mean, it's not a lot. It's like a little tiny, like 1/8 of an inch, maybe. Sometimes you don't even have that. So it just depends how much you get your fabric to bend or go down to the corner. So don't let it bother you if you don't have something to trim. Or if you have a ton to trim. It just means you didn't flatten your corner as much as you should. All right, so we are going okay, so we are going around this corner and we are going to flatten this again. But since it's sewn down this time, it's a lot easier than the first time. We're not moving things around or such. So we are getting this. Okay. And we are going around that corner. And I said, just take your time. Don't worry about how much time it takes. I know some people are like, oh, I can sew this and this fast. I was like, yeah, but sometimes you want to sew fast. Sometimes you want to sew accurately. And sometimes it does not mean the same thing. Or pretty. Sometimes you want pretty. And if you take your time, the quality will show. Even if you don't mass produce like some people do. I'm not one who can mass produce except certain patterns on a regular basis. Now, like my cube, I can actually sew one of those in about an hour, start to finish, cut to everything. But that's because maybe hour and a half, because I've sewn probably close to 50 of them since I wrote the pattern. My stow and go bag, I can sew one of those in about 10 minutes, start to finish. And I say that because I've sewn thousands of them. So it just depends on how often you sew something, how familiar you are with the pattern. Even if I'm familiar with this pattern, I still take my time around the tricky parts because then you're not going to have a wonky corner or wonky binding or anything like that. And see, I didn't have to trim that corner. I may go back a little bit after I'm done to trim a little bit before I fold over my binding. But that one didn't really need it compared to the other one. Just trimming some excess fraying threads. I don't know if anybody's seen any new movies recently. I saw He-Man for the second time yesterday. My husband and I went and saw it last week. Last week. And our movie theater does cheap movies on Tuesdays. So we took our daughters back to it because other than some slightly bad language, mainly by Skeletor, there really was not. It was not inappropriate at all. And it was a lot of fun and very enjoyable. So if you need a fun movie to see, go see He-Man. I know there's like Toy Story out and stuff right now, but this was a good, especially if you're a Gen X or early 80s baby or even early 90s baby who watched reruns of He-Man. If you have any familiarity with that, it's a lot of fun. So we are just going our way around. I said, I just take my time. And I know people say, oh, you could clip it. I said, yeah, I could clip the binding, but you don't have to. I actually prefer to sew it without clipping it. And I say that even when I'm doing like quilted bias binding, I prefer to do it this way because I will clip it once we fold it over because I don't want it to move. But right now, it's better if I have like kind of free reign with it. It's probably the best way to put it. And move it out of the way. Sometimes when you're doing it, it does stretch some, and so it won't fit the same. And so it's better just to kind of hold it in place So yes, we're going around that last corner. So everything's getting nice and yeah. Um, I'm at the very tail end of Gen X, so 1981 here. I know lots of different generations, but if you like call it, I guess you could call it kind of a superhero origin movie, kind of. It's a good movie. It was enjoyable. I mean, my kids liked it, and they're 9 and 18, and nowhere near that generation. So to each his own. It's like I said, it was a good movie. I mean, if I'm willing to pay for it twice in theaters, it says a lot. And I am trimming my corners as I'm down there before I get to it. So well, I was born. I'll be 45 on Friday, so I know I'm not the youngest, but I'm not the oldest in the big sewing community. But yeah, I enjoy all this and everything. So we are getting all this done. Okay, we got to move this lid over here again. It's in a way again. We are working our way to our last corner. And to me, I'm sitting there going, woohoo, I see the light at the end of the tunnel and finding threads that got in the seam, like the fraying threads of the fabric that I missed earlier. So we're trimming those off as I find them. It's always fun finding things that got stuck in seam allowances and stuff that you missed trimming earlier. Which is why before I mail out bags to customers, I always go over it with a fine tooth comb. But we are working our way around. So the two back corners are a little thicker because we are attaching the back. When you attach the back to the base and all that, so it is a little thicker back there, but it's not really that much thicker that I find. So we are getting close to where we started. So you can see where we started. We're going to overlap it. But I will say, Annette, if you wanted to start with the first pattern that I did binding, that's a little easier than this pattern. Go get my Cool Cube pattern. It's a lot easier as far as learning how to do the binding and everything because it's a lot smaller project than the Turtle Tote. And that's just because the size. It's pretty decent size cube. And like I said, I did have an add-on that I put a small and medium size to as well. And I have made reusable Christmas presents out of vinyl, making 3 different sizes. Yeah, this one is good because once you make a few cubes, I've been told they're addictive. I can't say I've made so many of them, but I do enjoy making them. I enjoy making them. The whole reason I came up with the cube patterns because there was nothing else out there. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Invention. All right, so we have our, and you overlap it. I always go about 1.5 inches or so, but if you see, this is my thing. So I did about 1.5 inches, but you really only have to go about 1/2 inch past your thing. All right, so I'm going to turn y'all back towards me. Hopefully that weird, of course, that weird glare's back. All right, so we have our, just so you can see the reason I have it, if you look at the top and bottom, they're facing the same direction when they're going to be open. So I did that so when she's looking inside, she'll see them in the same direction, not one facing the other way, even if it is upside down to the outside. So that's why I did that. All right, so we have our binding. What we're going to do, we're going to pull it all, make sure I trim my threads back here. I almost forgot. I was going to trim that little corner right here that I missed a minute ago. See, we haven't closed up our binding, so it's, you can still even trim your corners here. All right, so we are going to pull our binding to all the way around. And see, at this time, you can actually check in your seams, make sure no frays or anything like that. If you're using fabric like I am that's deciding to fray itself to death. So I always start where my seam started. Sorry about that. So what I do, just to show you, I will do it. It's hard to, I'll repin it in a minute, but just to show you, when I do this, I actually will fold it down to the seam and then fold it over just where I'm covering up the seam that we had. So you have it folded down our raw edge, and then I fold it over again, and we're going to clip it in place. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'll do it again because of course I didn't put a clip in it, and I can't see what I'm doing when I'm looking at it from the screen. So I'm going to clip it in place. Now I always like to start where my seam is because I can start stop. So basically I'm doing reverse stitching at the beginning and the end for the binding. And it makes it just a little stronger. And one reason I said I don't really worry about these seams with the webbing and everything like that, because if you think about it, you've added the webbing or handle, whichever you want to call it, whether you've made it out of vinyl, because I do explain how to make your handle out of vinyl as well. You have your, you've stitched it down, riveted the handle in, then you have the, your stitching that adds the bottom. That's one set of stitching. Then you have the stitching that adds your binding. That's another set of stitching. And then you have the stitching that attaches the binding to the other side of the bag. This thing's been stitched like 4 times to Sunday. So it's a very sturdy seam. I've never had one come out. So, and between cubes, the turtle totes, and several of the other bags I do, never had an issue. Now, the turtle tote's the only one that I have the webbing in the seam, because the only one I do this type of handle. For my cool cube, I have a handle that goes across the top. I also have a crossbody strap, which this does have a crossbody strap, but I'm not going into how to add that. That is in my cool cube pattern, because I did that to both my elder daughter and my husband's lunchbox, so that they could carry it with them, because my elder daughters went, I run out of hands, so I made her a crossbody strap. So we are folding this around, and like I said, I do not put clips in corners because I find they pop off and hit me in the face. And if you're interested in templates, now as far as my I don't have anybody who does my turtle tote because it's just so big. Sweetly Unique actually has templates from my Cool Cube, at least the original size. Any of my others that occur acrylic templates, Ray over in Emporium Threads actually carries the Gamer's Night Out templates. She hopefully will be able to do the Switch 2 soon, hopefully, and add those to her lineup as well. So I'm putting a few more clips just to make sure they stay where they're supposed to. So if you see, the clips are holding it in place. Just going around my corners and making sure they're good. It's always fun when the binding does not want to behave, trying to make it go around the corner. This is why I said, this is why I don't put clips around corners. Just because they don't listen. They go, corners, ha, I mock you. That's why a lot of people don't do squares or square-ish, because then you have to sew around a square or something like that. I think that's why I had never seen anything like the cube I ended up designing, because, and I still had to round the corners to make it work. Looks good though. I said they are fun, and I actually plan on making one soon. I'm going to make it look like a Rubik's Cube. I have some Rubik's Cube fabric and zipper pulls, so I'm kind of looking forward to it. Got to play with it a little. So we have our last side. So if you see, this has taken me start to finish on this side, adding it, talking to y'all and everything. I will be done within an hour. So just to do everything, I've done this, most of this bag in an hour each day, and that means that we've done this bag in about 3 hours, and that's with me going almost everything. The only thing I didn't go is how to attach the interfacing or anything like that. So this has covered a lot of stuff in that amount of time. So this is not the most complicated bag, but you do have to follow things in certain orders and stuff like that. And you have to, for this one, the big thing is making sure you reinforce everything with like rivets, extra stitching. Like I said, if I hadn't had the webbing on the bottom with the extra stitching down the webbing, I would have done like crosses across the bottom. Plus I also have the embroidery, so that also strengthens it a little with the wand on the bottom. So we have our last clip going in right here. And we have our extra one right there. Try not to knock stuff off. All right, so we have our bottom completely clipped. So we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to attach it, and then we will turn it right side out and we'll be done. Now we're going to sew this with 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I always start like right before my seam. We are just going a little bit at a time. Don't forget to back stitch. It's always fun when you've been sewing, you're like, did I actually back stitch? And if you're coming around to the same spot, it's not as big a deal, but just like to backstitch at the beginning and ending of my binding, just so I have extra stitching. Definitely can tell I'm sewing over the webbing right there, that it was thicker to sew over. And when I go back down, when there is no webbing. Now see, this is a little more difficult because I can't completely flatten it out like when we did the top with the being able to unzip the top completely. I can't lay it completely completely flat as easily because I got this big thing to move around. So as you can see, I'm kind of manhandling it as I go. Makes things fun, right? Trying to move big, bulky bags. The thing is, this is not the biggest bag I've ever thrown through my machine. Just finished sewing the leader of the pack backpack by Annie, and now that thing is big. I just found another random thread I forgot to trim, so at least I caught it. Are there any questions right now, Annette? I know you said you hadn't done binding yet, so I don't know if you're catching all that and everything. We're going to go around this corner. So we're on to our second corner. Try to flatten it out as much as I can as we go around this corner. All right. See, we're at the top of the webbing now. So I'm trying to make sure that my webbing is not in my seam, that has somehow magically appeared into my seam. Now, see, this side's a lot thinner because there is no webbing there as far as in the seam. But you have to make sure you're not adding the one that's part of your handle in there. We can go a little bit faster here because it's all open territory, basically, as long as you make sure that webbing's not in the way. We're almost about 3/4 through. So this is the easiest part of this whole process to me, is closing up the binding. Once you've actually attached the binding and you've clipped it, actually sewing it down, because you're just doing it 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the fold. There we go. That's not that hard. As you can see, we're getting around these curves is a pain in the rear because when you don't have it where you can lay it flat. Oh. But we're almost there. The light at the end of the tunnel is here. Oh, there we go. All right. Working our way around. We are Slowly getting around this last corner. And it's being a pain in the rear as far as the, there we go. Getting my lid out of the way. That helped a lot. Or should I say my top. Makes a lot of difference. There we go. And then we're back to the side that we started on, and we're almost to where we started. That's our last clip. So almost there. And we are officially done sewing the binding. Gotta make sure I trim my threads. Okay. I'll turn y'all this way. All right, so if you can see, nice clean finish. You can see my stitching around the edge, and if you can get it where it's right, your stitching on the other side looks the same. Same amount left, but we will push it right side out now. This is our big test, is that everything is like it should be. We push out our corners really good. So we stick our hand in it. And do all four corners. And we zip it closed just to show what it looks like. And we have our completed bag. And just to show what this looks like comparatively, it's almost like a little travel case. And so see that is our crossbody strap handles. And there's our wand right side up. Our other right side up for when she's carrying it like this. And if we unzip it, when she looks inside, everything's facing the right direction. So this is the reason why, even though it looks upside down, going by what was on the outside, this is right side up. All right, so we are all finished with this one. I'm going to try to do something special for next week. Don't know exactly, might be something patriotic. I might even write a very quick pattern for a flag. I don't know. It depends on what I'm able to get done in the next week. So we'll see. We'll be sewing something together next week. I don't know what it is yet. And I will see y'all next Wednesday. And so we have our completed turtle tote. And I will talk to y'all next week.